saw some nasty shit all up and down Reddit, saw that I was getting canceled simultaneously by Bad Empanada as not being sufficiently pro-Palestine, which is true. That's right. It's mine now, so I'm pro-Israel. I'm Israel Chai, you know, that's right. I can't wait for my major media career. None of it is relevant. We'll talk about some of it as a joke. It doesn't really matter. Squirrel has been trying to cancel leftists for a while. Fed behavior? No. They're very passionate about this issue. They've yelled at me in the past. Again, like I said, we can have healthy and reasonable disagreements with one another. It's not a cancellation. You deadass platform is genocide denier. The irony, of course, is that if you were to listen to the interview, these are some of the things that I addressed. This is some of the things that he also said. He says it's a genocide.
He may be making this decision because he's sensing a change in the weather, but that change in the weather is what's very important here. That's the result of not only of the inescapable, undeniable reality of starvation and genocide, but a movement that has been working very hard for many years.
I do believe that a lot of people are going to come back in here today and just like make a mountain out of a molehill, which is fine. If you guys want to be on this wavelength, that's all right. I'm going to keep it pushing. I'm going to keep talking about things that I think are relevant and important. Yeah, because he's covering his ass after 2 years of genocide support. I told you what my policy is. You say it's a genocide. You want to stop weapons transfers to Israel, and you are an advisor in the foreign policy blob, keep pushing. As long as you don't try to limit others who are more radical than you, try to stop others, and try to actively deplatform others, if you are unconditionally and uncompromisingly on board, then it is what it is. Good. Only time will tell if these people are being cynical or being bad. But it's not like we agreed. There was a back and forth there that I think a lot of people fail to consider. Also, the conversation was supposed to be about Ukraine and Russia, which obviously I can't stop talking about Israel, which is why it is what it is. I mean, you're talking to people in the Democratic Party structure like Zero Shock. They've had horrific takes up until this point, so you very clearly pushed them on things and didn't tone down your language at all. I know. The issue is a lot of people think that a conversation that you have with a person who's like a foreign policy guy who you have disagreements with, that you let your disagreements be known, is going to lead to like a bloodbath. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm talking to someone who is an ultra Zionist or someone who is like refusing to say it's a genocide. Like you know what my red lines are, you know, someone who is a significant hurdle, like someone who says like, oh, you can't speak about this, you can't speak about that. Someone who places the feelings of Jewish people cynically in front of like an actual genocide. The irony, of course, as always, is that it's the same principle behind the Nelk boys. Like I had a conversation with them in the immediate aftermath where I directly told them like what you guys did was like interviewing Adolf Hitler, and there were a lot of journalists that were tried at the Nuremberg trials in the aftermath of the Holocaust for their participation in it. And yet that in and of itself did not come across as like being sufficiently antagonistic to a lot of people, because some of you guys, I think, are more invested in the bloodbath of it all and not necessarily the information you can derive out of that. I told you what the reason was. I also didn't know a lot of the stuff that Matt Duss had said, to be fair, and I wish I had known so I could just like push back on some of this stuff, right? Having said that, I think there is a difference with the way that I have adversarial interviews with like someone like Matt Duss versus someone like Elise Stefanik, right? Crystal Ball's Stefanik interview is fantastic. Everybody loves that. Just apologize, man. I will never apologize for that. And the fact that you are demanding an apology for this is the most idiotic thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Who the are you? What the are you saying? Who the do you think you are? What do you mean? Like, this is what I'm talking about. The sense of entitlement that a lot of people have in this situation is so insane. I don't know much about Matt Duss beyond the interview and his commentary yesterday. He seems like a fine dude. What's going on? It's because of a bunch of the stuff that he has said in the past that even I think are, you know, early genocide apologia. And I wish I knew more about that, because what he's saying right now is that it's a genocide. You got to stop, you know, weapons transfers. And part of the reason why I wanted to address some of that was because like I wanted to hear what he would say in defense of like offensive weapons versus defensive weapons. And I made these exact points about like how you wouldn't give Nazi Germany anti-aircraft weapons, right? Like those are the kinds of conversations that I think are important to have. Yeah, he conceded on that front. That's the other thing. Like there was a bunch of things that he conceded on in that situation. And I think overall, as I've said before, one of the things that I find important to address is having disagreements with people even to the right of myself that would still be in the center left sphere. He also appeared on Amy Goodman and Sam Cedar. I know. But it's really interesting because obviously their audiences are not going to yell at them and be like, you're platforming an ultra-Zionist or whatever, you're a Zionist. The difference there is because I am more accessible than those people. And also because like, I think I am more radical than Sam Cedar and also Amy Goodman even as well. The people who need to hear this aren't even here yet. Chatters will bring it up over and over again and you will lose your temper and yell at them and that will turn into a cancellation of its own. I know. This is usually how it works. I guess the only thing I will say is eyes on the prize. Keep it pushing. Eyes on the prize. You must have a singular focus in this moment. If you hate me for it, if you think I'm a Zionist, fine. I've been having to deal with the inverse of that my entire life. It's a new meta. Instead of being called a terrorist, now I'm being called a Zionist, which is ironically enough, in my opinion, worse than being called a Hamas supporter. Being called an Israel supporter is worse than being called a Hamas supporter, except, of course, in the eyes of the broader American public. One is the established norm in American politics. The other is, of course, anyone that recognizes the humanity of brown people, which automatically means you should be shot and killed and possibly sent to jail. So in this community, and in I think in the minds of honest people, in the minds of people who recognize the reality that is unfolded here, which is unfortunately still a very, very small percentage of the population. Of course, I will continue pushing to try to make that percentage of the population size larger. But, the stuff that goes back and forth in inter-leftist circles are not things that the average American is thinking about. And my job is to try to make the average American more primed and more open-minded to the things that we talk about here. And I think I do a fairly good job at it. So I'm going to continue doing that. It's not the first time people have yelled at me over stuff like this, but that's it. You and ContraPoint should collab. You were putting such a spin on this to make everyone who's criticizing you look irrational. Does it make you feel irrational when you hear my perspective on this and that upsets you? So you have to say something that's irrational. I think demanding an apology for having a dude on who said liberal Zionists for far too long, for the record, only to turn around and talk about how Israel is committing a genocide, and also as a foreign policy advisor is demanding the halting of weapons transfers in the grand scheme of things, in an overwhelming sea of course, interviews that I conduct from far more radical positions is utterly ridiculous. The notion that I am similar in any way, shape, or form to a content creator who was silent for 22 months only to come out with a liberal Zionist position at the end of that 22 months when half of the people who are now yelling at me learned about Israel-Palestine for the first time ever post-October 7 from me, only to become, I guess, in their own estimations, more radical than me and now have these kinds of opinions. Also insane. Bad Empanada is farming this. I know. And it's fine. I think ultimately Bad Empanada is a force for good, and he will get some drama out of this. He'll farm it. It'll annoy me for the week, which is ironic because I'll be talking about some that's going on, something that's going on that's immediate, something that we must talk about with respect to the plight of Palestinians or whatever, and chatters will be coming in to be you're a Zionist because my favorite content creator Bad Empanada said you're a Zionist, you platform Matt Duss, and I'll be look at this screen right now, look at, do you feel like this is a more important conversation that we should be having as this one that we have every single day? Has he told you he's farming, or are you hoping? No, I don't talk to Bad Empanada directly. I assume he is. And then people will say you're admittedly not a good interviewer, you let him get away with too much, and then it'll just be a aesthetic conversation. My career, I think, is over. I'm being canceled, like I said. It's done. You are too charitable with your haters, I swear. It's because I have been a leftist for many, many years publicly. And in that time frame, I saw a community that I developed grow into the size that it did. And therefore, I am forever grateful for what I've been able to accomplish in that time frame, and that I know this position that I'm in is far better than my starting point. That's number one. Number two, I'm charitable to every single person, including my haters, always, because I believe that I can change their perspective. Number 3, especially if someone is on the same wavelength in general, someone like Bad Empanada, who I am in agreement with in terms of anti-Zionism, but we have maybe different methods. I don't really give a shit if he farms me too much. It's just a nuisance. It's annoying because of our collaborations and whatnot, and because of our ideological similarities. There's going to be a lot of people that watch both of us that will come in here and be annoying, but ultimately it doesn't matter because those guys are still going out and protesting. You know what I mean? And as long as they're doing that, I'm happy with it. As long as there's not like an active demand to deplatform someone like myself, and then it's fine. Also, last but not least, as someone who is a socialist in the United States of America, as someone who is a leftist in the United States of America, as someone who is a progressive in the United States of America, I eat it from every angle. I have for the past 7-8 years at this point. This is the only experience that I know. There has never been a moment in my political commentary career, where I have had broad support from every aspect, from every ideological group in this country. That's never happened. My position and your position is not popular. A lot of people might agree with our worldview, empathy first politics, but they don't have the tools to recognize that they agree with our empathy first politics. On an issue by issue basis, people might say, yeah, why don't we have free healthcare? Oh yeah, I don't want my tax dollars to go into unlimited slaughter in the global south. Or they won't say that, but they'll say like, I don't want my tax dollars to go killing like people overseas. I want them to, pave the roads and whatnot. But they don't understand that like the entire compilation, like the totality of those ideals actually point in the direction of socialism. Most people don't recognize that. My job is to try to get them to understand it. And of course, because this is a position that is not something that people know, this is not something that people understand. Socialism, the word is like spooky, scary, right? Either they don't know anything about it, or everything that they've learned about it is just like false and incredibly uncharitable. It makes it all the less likely and far more difficult to get this message to a broad audience. As I've said time and time again, being a leftist is a really annoying prospect. You're going to get yelled at by the far right. They're going to hate you. You're anti-fascist. They're fascist. They're going to despise you. They're racist. You don't want that. They're going to hate you. They're going to dox you. They're going to swat you. They're going to try to kill you. Okay? They're going to try to smear you. They're going to try to cancel you. Liberals will also hate you because your positions make them look fraudulent. Okay? Your worldview will make them look utterly fraudulent in the eyes of a much larger audience. That's the reason why you have the Bernie Sanders effect. Democratic politicians despise him. Why do they despise him? Same with Zoran. Well, because they show the rest of the country that there is an alternative vision that you could be on board with. And that makes liberals really mad. That makes liberals really mad because then all of a sudden they look bad. All of a sudden people go and say, why don't you do this? Why don't you do the same thing that these guys are doing? And then last but not least, every other person on the left hates you as well. And that's because you might have a minor ideological difference or a different way of achieving ultimately the same goals. So you eat it from all ends. That is just how it's been. And the reality of the matter is we don't do this because we want to be liked. Especially in my position, being liked is important only as it spreads the message across to an audience that will be charitable rather than uncharitable. This is precisely the reason why the past 6 years of endless smear campaigns of, getting clipped out of context and then all of the drama surrounding it has played a formative role in making a lot of people who would otherwise agree with my worldview be disagreeable because they don't approach anything that I'm saying in a charitable manner. That's why they never talk about the message. That's why they never talk about the policies. They just talk about the messenger and how hypocritical the messenger is. Then they'll use the healthy disagreements that leftists have with one another as a way to say, see, his own audience hates him. It's not an easy position to be a leftist, but once again, you don't do it because you're going to get love from all of these different groups that you advocate for. You do it because it's right. That's why, in spite of the millions and millions and millions of different instances over the course of the past 6 years, or over the course of the past 12 years, in spite of the reality that I have been yelled at from members of my own community who are like-minded individuals who think I'm not doing the right thing as far as like making this a safe enough space for everybody, or liberals who say I've up the bag for them and I was antagonistic to their favorite politician and that's the reason why they lost, or the right-wingers who want to kill me. I've continued. My positions on the things that I've advocated for have not changed at all. There have been a million people that have come before this very moment that have said, Hasan is secretly a right-winger. One day you'll see. Many of those people have become right-wingers, ironically enough. You know, the Jimmy Dore contingency of people who were like, oh, dude, you are just a Democrat Party dick rider. Me, on the other hand, I hate the Democrats adequately and sufficiently. And then what happened? They now all vote for Republicans and defend the Republican Party. Once again, not my first rodeo. It's all good. By the way, that wasn't even a diss on Bad Empanada either, for the record. I'm not comparing him to like someone who is ideologically rudderless or a grifter. I'm not saying that at all. I think he's honest. I think he's a little insane. But I think when he has a disagreement with someone, you know, that's an honest disagreement. If there's one policy, well, if there's two policies that I abide by, it's one, don't punch left. Especially when people are on board with the same causes you are. And this even includes Bad Empanada as well, no matter what he says. He says I'm a Zionist and everyone in my audience is a Zionist. Okay, fine. Number two, always maintain charitability and understand that people are at the mercy of social conditioning in general. I myself certainly am and certainly was, and so have many of you in this community. And that is precisely the reason why you have to always be charitable. That's it. And also, last but not least, message appropriately. It's sad because you never shit on Bad Empanada like he shit on you. What is he achieving doing that anyways? Same if you did the same to him, it's unproductive. What Bad Empanada achieves when he shits on me is, let's be real, getting some of the people in this community to most likely go over there and watch his video, give him some ad revenue. That's like a decent way to do it. So I think that's part of it for sure. A little bit of it, maybe a little bit. And, you know, it is what it is. Is he not trying to change your mind? Trying to change my mind into doing what? When Bad Empanada and I had that conversation on Noah's stream, if you realize like a big chunk of this back and forth actually derived from Bad Empanada not understanding what my positions were, and also just straightforwardly calling me a Jewish exceptionalist and blah, 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 all this other stuff. He'd done this before. He has done this many times over. This is not his first rodeo. And yet some of you dumb fucks do actually eat that bait every single time and then come in here and annoy the fuck out of me when I'm trying to do whatever I'm trying to do. So is he a left-wing grifter? No, I think Bad Empanada is earnest. I think he's just, you know, flies off the handle a little bit, which is understandable. This is not a normal issue. This is not a normal issue. That's it. This is a genocide. So, of course, people are going to get mad. Bro, the shit about Matt does has nothing to do with Bad Empanada, though. Yes, I think there are people in my community who are also frustrated that I'm not being as, like, contentious as someone like Matt does. Part of that is because I didn't know what he had said in the past as far as like what his defenses were. I just kind of knew him as like a guy who post October 7 was definitely on the liberal Zionist track, even though he had been an advocate for cutting weapons transfers to Israel alongside Bernie Sanders. He was Bernie Sanders' former policy advisor. And if I had known about some of the things he had said, I think I would have been more contentious overall, especially when prodding how he went through his journey, because I think there's like a sense of embarrassment, especially at this stage, from people who do foreign policy stuff for not being on board early on, and not recognizing it early on. And he tried to communicate that to me by way of Biden, which I, of course, vehemently disagreed with and told him was utterly ridiculous. And I didn't let him, quote unquote, get away with saying whatever he wanted to. There was a lot of pushback. You mentioned this before. I just can't understand why you're so ready to go on Tucker Carlson's podcast. There's absolutely nothing you can gain from that. He's the most experienced media demon to ever live. He's the modern Joseph Goebbels. What's the point on going on that podcast? Tucker Carlson's podcast? Massive platform. But he is not. I think you guys fail to understand. If I were to go on like Joe Rogan Experience, I wouldn't be platforming Joe Rogan and be the other way around. And same with Tucker Carlson as well. It's not even a real thing that's happening. It's a hypothetical anyway. I said a lot of messed up things 2 years ago, but I think it should be clear that his opinion is chasing. Doesn't seem like a bad guy. Maybe he should apologize for some of that stuff, but it's not his view anymore. Yeah. I've also made it clear that if someone is saying it's a genocide, someone is talking about how we got to stop, we got to stop weapons, we got to stop aid to Israel, all this. And more importantly, last but not least, are also not standing in opposition to others who have even more radical positions than they do, then that's fine. You know what I mean? We need people like that too. It's just it's always supposed to be a broad coalition. You're not going to have every single person come to the table with the same worldview that you have developed over the course of the past 22 months. Let's be real. There are plenty of people that are in here right now that didn't have any of these opinions 22 months ago. Because once again, from the outside world, I think that a lot of people see what we do here and they see the way people react to certain things and they see themselves in the person that's getting yelled at. And I think if our goal is to be as open-minded and as like broad and, create a movement that is as large as possible, which is a necessity for any sort of change, then, we have to be a little bit more careful, I think, of the way that we look. This doesn't mean that like someone can just overnight be like, I'm a good person now. And then everyone should just like eat that shit up. That's not what I'm saying either. I think, you should remember what people's positions were in the moments when it was necessary for them to also push. I think it's ultimately not a massively consequential nor relevant conversation that took place between me and Matt Duss, and I think people are going a little crazy over it. That's it. I think you're a bit hypocritical. I like you a lot, but you'll constantly say I'm not a journalist, but constantly try to be one. And when people criticize you for doing poor journalism, you'll use the fact that you say you're not a journalist as a crutch. I think you just already admitted that you recognize that I'm not a journalist and that at no point have I actually said I was a journalist. You think I'm trying to be a journalist when I have conversations with people, when I never am trying to be a journalist. You literally just got mad because of perceived hypocrisy that comes along with something that I never said I was, that you think I'm actually trying to do. That's the issue. You've said you do journalism. Yes. The times where I do quote unquote things of journalistic value, in spite of not being a journalist, talking to someone who is like in Gaza, for example, okay? Going out to a protest and filming the protest from the perspective of the protesters, or, things that happen to me that have broader consequences for society, or a conversation with like Mahmoud Khalil, or going out and interviewing the firefighters, the California prisoner firefighters that are combating wildfires. Like those are things that have journalistic value. That's not all I do. That's not most of what I do. That's just what I do, having the function of journalism. But I don't say I'm a journalist. I say I'm a political commentator. I play basketball. I'm not a basketball player. Look, there's going to be a million different opinions and a million different voices. Many of them are going to be contentious. I talk about politics. Politics is always going to be a contentious subject. A lot of people either A, treat it like it's drama and love the back and forth that takes place in that regard, or B, understandably play it close to their chest. And so when they hear something that they might have misunderstood or didn't fully comprehend or completely outright disagree with, all of a sudden this is like a world-shaking event. It's a world-breaking event for themselves. Like, oh, this guy who I thought, had my best interest in mind, I disagree with him on this one thing. Whether it's because I might have misunderstood it or because I just have a vehement disagreement on this issue, this is really fucked up.